Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Akolona, and this is Nashville. Today is kind of a special day, y'all. It's the 1-year anniversary of the first ever episode of This Is Nashville. I know, right? Which, feels like it's the right time to talk about how our identity as a town has changed over time and continues to evolve. 10 years ago, Nashville was dubbed It City. And whether you love it or hate it, the term is stuck. And the city has changed a lot in the decade since. You've probably noticed that we're drawing millions more tourists a year. People are moving here in droves. Businesses are relocating here. That's not even half of it. But what do the people who've been living here for generations feel about the city and where it is? How are newer arrivals learning about where the city has been? How are we all working together to help guide the city's future? Before we begin to answer those questions, let's go back to where this started. In 2013, the New York Times published a story titled "Nashville's Latest Big Hit Could Be the City Itself." And the story starts innocently enough. Portland knows the feeling. Austin had it once too, so did Dallas. Even Las Vegas enjoyed a brief moment in as the nation's It City. Yep. It was that part. So let's talk with the person who wrote those words and helped usher in the It City era. Kim Severson is a food correspondent for the New York Times, and she joins us now from Atlanta. Kim, thanks for being here, and welcome to This Is Nashville.
Thanks. It's great to talk with you.
Really great to talk with you, too. So tell me, how did you get the idea for this article?
I know. It's so funny. I've heard so much about this art. I think almost more than any other piece I've written in the last 10 years, this one keeps coming up. And, I'll meet someone in Nashville, and depending on what side of the coin you're on, they'll be like, "Are you the one who wrote that story?" And I'll be like, either I'm apologizing or I'm like taking the congratulations. So, at the time, I was a national correspondent for the Times, and my job was to kind of scan the landscape. I did, covered hurricanes and politics and all kinds of things, and also trying to cover how the South was changing and growing. And Nashville just kept coming up and coming up and coming up. I heard from, there were cultural indicators, right? The Grammys for the first time were announcing in Nashville and not in Los Angeles. Gallup poll ranked Nashville in the top 5 for growth. You had all kinds of, economic city projects happening there. And then, of course, there was the fantastic show with Connie Britton that helped, from a cultural standpoint, put you on the map. I mean, you had GQ calling it Nowville. Mm-hmm. And I write a lot about food and eat a lot. And, Nashville's food scene was really, really happening. It was quite, part of a kind of a focus of the nation's food critics at that time. So all of that, economic growth, some promising big civic projects, this kind of cultural zeitgeist where everybody seemed to be moving to Nashville, or people like, oh yeah, I'm going to go check. I'm spending the weekend in Nashville. So it was all of that. And it seemed to me enough to write a story. I lived in Portland for a while when Portland got its kind of moment. Certainly Austin, people in Austin, will know what that was like. So it seems like in the country, every city has its moment, and this was Nashville's.
So why was it important to you to write about the South differently than it had been reported on?
I think correspondents from the New York Times who spend time in different regions, and particularly in the South, have a particular battle, and that is convincing the New York editors that perhaps they don't know everything about a region. And I think the South, had gone through a lot of different lenses at the Times, and I certainly think there was that the new progressive South trying to grapple with the sins of its past. I think there were religious tensions, religious tensions that were spilling into politics that were happening in the South. I think culinarily, there was the Paula Deen era, and I think a lot of people thought about the South's cultural and culinary history in kind of a little bit of an outdated way. So I, lived in Atlanta. I still live in Atlanta, and I saw the vibrancy of a lot of cities and the kind of cultural heft of cities like Atlanta and Nashville, and also the texture of a place, the texture of the South. This idea that it was all Bible Belt. I guess that sort of bothered me. I took it upon myself to try to find stories that moved the image of the South in the nation's eyes forward.
Tell me, what were people here talking about when you interviewed them?
Well, there was a little bit of a sort of like, oh my God, we're like the popular kids in school now feeling among some people. I think there was this sense of, certainly the mayor at the time was, Carl Dean was very high on the deals that he'd made for the city. I mean, you had the Music City Center was a big civic deal. Even some of the folks in, some of the more staid industries, even like religious publishing, I think felt like they were in a good spot in Nashville. I talked to Jennifer Nettles, who, is an actor and a musician who had just moved, bought a farm in the area. And, she'd grown up in Atlanta. She said, there's just this charm and richness in Nashville, and the size of Nashville allows for that sort of vibe to happen. So there were, I think people were really happy and excited to have the city perched on the edge. Now, I will say there were certain people, and I remember John Edgerton, the late John Edgerton was one of them, who said, this is all well and good, but if we do not take care of people who don't have enough money to get housing, and we don't pay attention to our schools, our public schools, and pay attention to some of the social issues we have, all of this is going to be for naught.
So the term "it city" has been popular here. It was first given to Nashville in your article. After all these years, the term has some real staying power. Let's take a listen to a sampling of what you started in 2013 from the times it's come up in our own show.
Everything just kind of went crazy in 2013 when the New York Times said that we were the it city.
The Nashvillians like to say that we are the it city, that we care about the people that call this place home. But in order to tell the story properly, you got to talk about the Black women.
Yeah, how can the city call itself the it city when so many people are going hungry and food insecure?
Absolutely.
I think that's what changed in 2013 to make the New York Times crown us as it city. We finally had world-class restaurants that people from the East Coast and West Coast would come here and say, this is just as good or maybe even better than some of the restaurants we have at home.
Make it some of the affordable housing for Metro employees to keep them here in the city so we can still be that it city that Metro employees want to continue working for.
And Nashville, if it wants to be the it city, then it's going to have to address the needs of the disabled.
Now, in order, that was David Steele Ewing, Dr. LaRotha Williams, yours truly, David Steele Ewing again, Nina Stroud, and Steve Norman. And, as you can hear at the end, sometimes people will use it city as a frame. Like, if we're going to be the it city, then we have to do X, Y, or Z. Kim, you quote the late John Edgerton in your piece, and he gets at this a little bit. What was his concern about the way the city was changing back in 2013, as you mentioned?
Well, he, loved Nashville very much, and I think at the core of his comments were that you if you really want to be the kind of city that you envision when someone says it's city, or you're taking that civic pride, or there's that kind of collective momentum in a city, to really make that mean something and last, you've got to tend more to the residents than you do the tourists. You've got to you got to take care of home before you take care of all the visitors who are coming into your home. And I think that he presented that as an opportunity as much as a concern at the time. Again, this is from a man who loved the city and the culture. And I think it's hard to not lose all the things that make that make Nashville great. Although, Nashville's always been a little bit of a, they've just kind of a little bit of an outward flash to it in a way, or, maybe a manufactured outward flash. And then some very, I think there's been, like any growing urban city, and certainly any city of the South, some real clashes around race, culture, religion, sexual orientation, rich and poor. I think Nashville was and is still grappling with all of those things.
Sometimes we forget that it was Nashville's turn in the spotlight. Question for you, is our turn over?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's up to Nashville. I always tell people, I can't write a story on things that aren't there. So, what was happening in Nashville was real. I kind of put a little frame around the Jell-O there and called it the It City, but all of those dynamics were happening, right? And I'm very interested to see, what's come of it in 10 years. I still visit it. I'm not deep in the city politics as much as I used to be. I feel like people blame me for the rolling bachelor party bike bars and stuff. I didn't make those up just because I called it Knit City. But I did notice last time I was there, I think a little bit late last year, and eating around at some places and visiting some friends. And I did feel that, I could tell that the difference, and certainly the bachelorette party culture, and also feeling a little like, maybe some of the, I don't know, some of the happy energy that was happening in Nashville was fading a little. But I'm really interested to hear what your guests and what you all think about it.
Oh, we'll find out pretty soon. Tell me this, though. Last question for you. What do you think the term It City represents today?
Well, I think it was a good rallying cry for Nashville at the moment. It was a way to kind of pull together the fact that, hey, we've got something special here and some opportunities. The big question, I guess, is, is it faded? Has it matured into something other than the most popular kid in high school? What's it doing in college and right after? I think that's where the city is. You had a burst of popularity, got into a good university. Now you're having to look for that job. So I guess you could kind of look at it like that way. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Kim Severson is the national food correspondent for the New York Times, who dubbed Nashville the It City in the New York Times 10 years ago. Kim, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We have to take a short break. When we come back, we'll ask some folks who remember the old Nashville about what it was like to live in the It City today. Do you think the term It City still applies to Nashville? How do you think it's changed our town? Tweet us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil A. Colonna, and this is Nashville. Or maybe I should say, this is the It City, but it hasn't always been this way. I can tell you a lot of people who were born and raised here talk often about how different our town used to be. They talk about what life was like here before Major League Sports, bachelorettes, and booming development. It's true, the city has changed. That happens everywhere. To give us a sense of what Nashville was like before the It City status, I'd like to introduce my next guest, who, you guessed it, is a native Nashvilleian. Charles Wig Walker is a blues singer who came up in the Jefferson Street blues scene and continues to perform at Acme, Feed, and Seed. Wig, thanks for being here. Welcome to This Is Nashville. Good to have you with us, sir. So, as I said, you grew up here in Nashville in the 50s. Tell us what this city was like back then.
Well, I was just listening to your piece there, and it's quite a change since the 50s. The 50s was, as you know, I was a kid, and I feel like Nashville is called the It City because it is the It City now. But back in the 50s, it was tough, very tough. Just trying to navigate your life and do what you're trying to do. I was into music. I've been into music all my life, and I had a rough time at the beginning, but it happened for me. I did secure a job and went on from there.
Can you describe the energy in the music scene on Jefferson Street at that time?
Pretty much, yes. Well, it was a very vibrant music scene between Fisk University and Tennessee State. People used to walk. The streets were crowded every day, just walking, going from pub to pub, tavern, even all the way over to the New Era Club, which was on Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
I had crowds and crowds of people that filled the club every day, every night. And
so you could say that Jefferson Street looked like Broadway does now.
Yes, very much so.
You had dreams to make it in the music business, yet you chose to pursue your dreams in New York instead of your hometown. Tell me this, how much did the Jim Crow segregation of the city play into your decision to leave?
Well, I think it played into it quite a bit, but I also figured I recorded one record here in Nashville, and it was a blues record. I got some play behind it, and it did okay, but it never was anything big. So I wanted to try my thing in a larger city, and I figured New York. Plus, I had people living in New York, so I had somewhere to stay. So, and plus, I had met a lot of artists coming through Nashville, a lot of the top stars then, and they told me if I got to New York, look them up, especially James Brown.
Mm-hmm.
So I did. I looked them up. As a matter of fact, I lived right on the same street as the Apollo. I lived in the back of the Apollo, like on 127th Street.
Okay, the world famous Apollo Theater, and you sing blues downtown every Sunday at Acme Feed and Seed, including classics like Sam Cooke's "A Change Is Gonna Come." Let's listen to a bit of your cover of that classic now from a live performance at Acme.
Okay. I was born in a little old tent. Oh, and like the river I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming. I know change gon' come. Oh, yes it will. It's been too.
A change certainly did come to Nashville. Tell me, what was it like performing in Nashville now compared to when you first left in 1961?
Well, it's quite a difference as opposed to playing on Charlotte Street and Jefferson Street to Broadway. It's quite a difference. Just hordes of people, all kinds of people, not just in my day. I performed to all blacks audience, and now it's mainly all white. But I've taken both of them in, and I enjoyed playing for both audiences. I wish there had been a mixture of people back in the day, but it just wasn't that way. It was pretty tough. You had to stay in your area, Because I got jobs sometimes downtown, like in Prentice Alley. I got a job playing in a club down there, and I remember so well. I just was going after the break. I was on the break. I was going to walk across the floor and get a soda, and they stopped me and told me I couldn't do that. They would bring it back to the dressing room. But that's just how different it is, you know.
If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekolona. We're talking this hour about our town 10 years after being dubbed the It City. Tweet us your comments at This Is Nashville. Now, I'd like to introduce my next guest. Tom Morales is also a native Nashvilleian and a restaurateur whose company renovated the Loveless Cafe, Acme Feed and Seed, as well as the now defunct Woolworth on 5th. We talked with him on our recent episode about the lunch counter sit-ins. And Tom, I want to thank you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
So you've put in a lot of work in revitalizing and renovating downtown. What was special to you about the downtown you remembered growing up?
First off, I got to say Charles is being very humble. And I want to add one thing before I answer that. But Chet Atkins I worked for him for a period of time, and he said one day to me, he says, Roy Clark and we used to sneak over there and check out those cats. And then he'd hesitate for emphasis and say, because those cats couldn't come over and listen to us. Mm-hmm. And that was always powerful. And then they built I-40 right through what was the first mecca of music in Nashville. But growing up in Nashville, I grew up with 10 kids, 9 brothers and sisters, and it was a 2-car parade from Madison down to, downtown. That was before big box stores happened, and you would go to the hardware store and get your shovels or whatever you needed, and you go across the street and get your dog food. They had a free dog dip at Acme, and it was my mother was a taskmaster, she's a drill sergeant, and she'd say, if you don't behave, and so she'd line us up if we behaved, and we'd go up to Candyland and get some candy, and if we were really good, we'd go to the Woolworth and get a chocolate milkshake. And the early 60s, when I was growing up here, it was Nashville was just a cool town. And the music was everywhere. It was a creative town. And, so for me as a kid, I was like wide-eyed all the time and spent most of my adult life trying to save buildings. And now I feel like I'm trying to save the city of Nashville.
Tell me, what did those cultural gatherings back in the 60s, what did they mean to the city back then?
They meant everything. It really, I think the whole culture of hospitality and community circled around events, and each little segment of Nashville had their own community, whether it was the Jefferson Street, Charlotte corridor, or Lower Broadway was a seedy place. I mean, my dad for entertainment would put us in the station wagon and drive us by the Ryman Auditorium, which would have everybody from Appalachia circled around it like 2 or 3 times waiting to get into the Opry. At that point, the Opry was a discovery platform. Patsy Cline came to town to become a star. She wasn't a star, so she knew if she could get on a stage, whether it was a honky-tonk or the Ryman Auditorium, she could become a star. And I think that's really where Nashville's changed. I mean, it's that dream of, we call it, a lot of the people that work with us have a day job and a dream. They're here to make music, to be creative, and their day job may be serving or bartending or whatever they're doing to pay the rent and eat, but they're still pursuing their dream. But the stages, there's more creative people here than there ever has been, but there's not as many discovery platforms as there used to be.
You said you were just trying to save she was trying to save Nashville and not just the buildings.
Well,
talk more about that.
Well, I think the story that we just heard, which was by Kim, was excellent. I mean, I think it was a moment in time where we fell in love with ourselves. We became enamored with us when it's always true when somebody outside your own community compliments you. It means more, even though your best friend may have said the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when the New York Times anointed us the It City, I think it went to our heads. I think the ego of the city changed. Bigger is better. The little guy on Main Street was forgotten. Rents skyrocketed. Land prices skyrocketed, and the little guy who is an incubator of who we are as Nashvillians, the ones who give us our personality, kind of got left in the rearview mirror.
Does the term "It City" diminish what makes Nashville special to you?
I think in hindsight it does. At the time, I was enamored with it just like everybody else. But when you give opportunity to the well-connected and the people who the fat cats came to town for, get all the attention, and the locals who were the reason they came are ignored, then yeah, I think it's a sad story, really.
Is that what you saw as the revitalization efforts took off in the 90s?
Yeah, I think it was all built around ego. I mean, when we started dancing in the district in the early 90s, there was nothing but porn shops and pawn shops. And our whole goal was to bring locals back downtown. Now, guess what our goal is? Get locals back downtown.
Yeah.
It's a different time and a different era, and it's going to take a different method. But we brought people back down. For 10 years, we did dance in the district when there was one bar on Lower Broad that anybody would venture into. You had Merchants, which was Ed Stolman. You had Groon Guitars, and I bought a building on 408 Broad, and that was it. And we brought free live music back downtown, and it started the whole thing in motion. And I'm ashamed sometimes that we started this. And we quit after 10 years. When we quit, there were 40 bars on Lower Broad. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, yeah, I think our leadership needs to take a deep breath. Chet, you say, put your ego aside and make the music. And I think that's really, right now, I think we need to go back to our roots and give the discovery platforms back to the kids that come here to make music.
Wig, let me ask you, when you think of this term "It City" and what it means to you, and you've seen the city change, how do you reflect on all these years and all this change?
Well, to me, the It City, when I first heard that, I kind of understood where they were coming from, but it didn't seem like the It City to me, because
I mean, you spent time in New York. You also spent a long time in Europe as well.
Yes, I did. And well, New York was always the It City, but and still is. But Nashville, to me, I think Nashville was kind of on the right track for they brought entertainment in. They brought everything. I mean, Broadway is like a circus now. And that kind of changed my attitude about the It City. I can hardly stand it. I mean, just to walk out of the club on the break, and it's just loud and crazy,
So, there's a lot of longtime residents who get upset or jaded when they talk about this growth. What are those conversations like that you're having with some of your friends and peers? What do you say to them when the topic comes up, Wig?
Well, when the topic comes up, I just kind of agree on both ends, because I'm not into politics, and I'm just here doing my thing, and hope that the city can keep thriving and making some changes, which they are. But I don't know if it's in the right thing for everybody. The changes they're making, I don't think it's going to help everybody. But it's pretty much like that in every city. So what can I say?
We have to take a short break. When we come back, we'll invite a few newer arrivals to our city and find out what living in the It City means to them. What does living in the It City mean to you? Tweet us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back. I'm Khalil A. Colonna, and this is Nashville. We're talking this hour about our city, 10 years after the iconic and divisive moniker, It City. Some combination of that infamous New York Times story, a TV show, a hit TV show, sports, bachelorettes, and destination dining have made our city the place to be for the past decade. A year ago today, in our first ever episode as a show, we convened a panel of old and new Nashville to begin our journey as a daily show into the ever-changing identity of this town. So it's only fitting that today we continue that discussion. Before the break, we spoke with two native Nashvillians who remember what our town was like before the increased popularity. Now let's talk to two newer residents about what living in the It City means to them. Judith Clerjune is the policy director for Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition, or TIRC, and Brendan McLenaghan is an aspiring musician who moved to Music City last summer. Judith, Brendan, thanks for being here. Welcome to This Is Nashville.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Excited to be here.
Really a pleasure to have you both. So, Brendan, you moved here less than a year ago. What did you know? Right. What did you know about Nashville before you got here?
I mean, I knew Nashville mostly by the reputation that it's kind of gained, for better or for worse, from things like that It City article. You know, I knew that it was a place that lots of people around my age were moving to, whether it be, entertainment related or otherwise, people from all over the Midwest, from the coast, from the South. I came from New Orleans, where I was in for college. So plenty of people from that area were coming here. I knew it as the reputation as, big music city, of course, but also just a place lots of people were coming to for their own reasons, businesses, things like that.
Be honest, when you were younger, you were watching a television show and you said, I'm going to move there one day.
It was on the short list for sure.
Okay. So tell me, why did you decide to come here instead of New York or Los Angeles if you're an aspiring musician?
I mean, a number of reasons. Nashville is, while growing exponentially, as we've discussed in the whole show, it's not quite the jungle that LA or New York are, at least not yet. And I hope it doesn't ever get that way. Just from the times I've visited, it seems like even though there's a lot happening at the same time, it's more of a laid back vibe, similar to New Orleans in a lot of ways. It seemed like a place that, doesn't have nearly as much of a high intensity culture about it, the way that certainly I would say Los Angeles does. Those are all kind of reasons about the feel of the city. It's a lot smaller too. I feel like it would be easier to kind of navigate as, a person sort of living on my own for the first time, living mostly independently of my parents for the first time, than it would be in a place like New York, which is just crazy.
Are you happy with your decision?
I am, yes. Of, those big three sort of entertainment capitals in North America, I'm definitely glad that's the one I picked.
Mm-hmm. Now, Judith, I understand your family is originally from Haiti, and you all moved here to Nashville in 2008. What was your impression?
Yes, that's right.
Tell me, what was your impression of Nashville back then?
Yeah, so I would say, it's definitely, I'm a newcomer compared to people who have been here since the 50s, but even looking back to 2008 versus today, the city has dramatically changed, from everything to housing, to traffic, to the number of businesses who are here. So it's really a different city from even a couple years ago.
You left for college, but decided to come back. Why did you make that decision to come back to Nashville?
Yeah. So for me, I really came back to Nashville and also am doing the work that I'm doing with the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition because I saw that even though so many of my community have been here for quite a while, Haitians and other immigrants have been here for decades, so many people were still being excluded and silenced in the conversation about where the city is going. And so it was really important for me to come back and make sure that I can work in some kind of way to make sure that our communities are visible, right? That as we get to have this conversation about whose values are prioritized or which communities are not left behind, I think it's important that immigrants are not left behind, right? That we are also included in the vision and the future of Nashville.
So you come back to Nashville after college, and it's this it city. So tell me, what does the term it city mean to you?
Yeah, so I think that term brings in a very sort of conflicting vision for the future of Nashville, right? I think of a lot of the growth that we've seen in the past decade or so, but also we've seen the ways that so many marginalized communities, Black folks, immigrants, and others have been excluded in a lot of that growth. And so for me, it's a question of, what is Nashville going to continue to choose? At this point, I think we've already made our choice regarding growth and the corporations that we're prioritizing. But right now, I think the challenge is how do we make sure that we do not continue leaving people behind?
Well, what will it take for immigrants and refugees to feel more a part of their city, as if the benefits of living in the it city are available to them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think part of what we work on is to make sure that, as we're seeing all of this growth in Nashville, that the infrastructure of the city is keeping pace with the growth that we're seeing. So, on one hand, how do we make sure that folks who have been here for a very long time aren't being pushed out, but also immigrants who are coming here, who are newcomers, how are we make sure that there are resources available to make sure that people can thrive? So whether that's, expanding and investing in immigration legal services, which the city has chosen to do with some of the American Rescue Plan funding, or making sure that there is, accessible English language services available for folks, or affordable housing. I think there's a lot of different ways that we need to make sure that folks have what they need, and that we're creating a city where all communities have the ability to thrive, regardless of how long they've been here. Yeah.
Some people are very protective of the city, and they're upset with all the changes. We've heard the term transplant used often without a smile. Brendan, do you think transplants get a bad rap?
I think from some people, transplants can get a bad rap. I was this is not my second time being labeled that after spending 4 years in New Orleans. I think people, much like a lot of the people we've talked to earlier in this program, have been here for a long time. And when there's a sudden influx of new arrivals to a place, bringing their own ideas, their own cultures, their own histories, it can be jarring for everybody. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think, influxes of new ideas are part of what propels communities forward. It's just that doesn't mean it isn't a big change for people. And I think that, I don't know if frustration is the right word, but that shock can be manifested, I think, sometimes in maybe ways that are unintentionally negative, like just labeling things, oh, they're just transplants, they don't know anything. Like it's like what, I guess us, the transplants, what we're doing might be new and different, but I don't think it's uniformly a bad thing. It's just different and new, and it'll take some time to get used to. And 20 years from now, it'll be part of the norm of Nashville, and people coming then will be the transplants, and they'll have their own new ideas, and they'll just continue. From
transplant to transplant, I understand what you're saying. I moved here a year and a half ago, but my experience has been different. One, I think a little bit because of age. This is the first time since college I've moved to an area or a new city where I didn't know anyone, so it's been a long time for that. I'm a little bit more mature and able to navigate the city in that form, but also the job that I have, sitting in this host chair. I am a transplant that people were excited to meet and introduce and open their arms to and welcome to the city. Do you think that sometimes for people who are just out here with their guitar or a dream or a business plan and a dream, there's a huge literary community here who have their draft and a dream. Do you think the city is warm and open to embracing those folks who are moving here?
I think so. I think it's just about, finding those pocket communities that have a shared value, a shared dream, a shared interest, and kind of taking that and using that as your foundation and running with it. Because, there will always be plenty of people who are about as new as you are with how big Nashville is now and how fast it's growing. So I think it's important for people who are new here to sort of find these little pocket communities, maybe outside of your job, outside of your apartment building or whatever, and trying to figure out, where do you fit in? Because there are people there who will, I think, for the most part, be accepting, even if they've been here a long time and you're, pretty new or brand new even.
My grandmother always said, you want to meet people in your neighborhood, sit on the stoop. If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekolona. We're talking this hour about the impact of Nashville being the it city. Tweet us your thoughts at This Is Nashville. Blues singer Charles Wig Walker and restaurateur Tom Morales are still with us. You both were born and raised here, and you've seen a mountain of the changes over the course of your lives. I wonder if you have any advice for a brand new person to Nashville like Brendan. Wig?
I don't know if I have any advice, but I feel like the city is here, and I welcome all people. As long as they can get themselves together here, I welcome them.
Mm-hmm. Tom, what does the city need to do to ensure that old and new Nashville, can grow and exist together and thrive at that?
Well, I think you have to embrace your roots. And I believe, the welcome table. I mean, when we did the Woolworth, that was the theme. I mean, it was a welcome table. I think this town is unique in that talent speaks to talent. If you're in LA, you may be in a pocket of talent, and there's 20 pockets of talent here. When you can, if you've got talent and you're willing to work, you will find the connection. And there's still enough of us out there that are putting on the people on the stage that are creative and that are serious about their craft. And so I think your songwriter said it perfect. He, find people that have the same goals as you and spend as much time with them as you can, and you'll make your way.
Wig, you said something interesting when we talked in the previous segment. You talked about how the segregation of the era when you were growing up and in the music scene really changed things. Mm-hmm. You would on Jefferson Street, and Chet Atkins and those guys had to sneak to come to see you. Yeah. But then, you weren't allowed to perform downtown. Now when you do perform downtown, it's by choice, in a sense, a segregated crowd, Folks aren't really choosing to in droves to really go down there and see. What does the city have to do to really shed itself of some of its past, shed some of the past skin fully, so it can be this robust it city for everybody?
I think the city itself is open to all people. I think when people come down to Broadway, it's expensive. And so that creates a problem for a lot of people. But I don't think there's any so much segregation or integration. I think people can come to anywhere they want to go to now and do whatever they want to do, as long as they respect the environment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Now, Judith, tell us, what steps would you like to see the city take to make this an it city for everyone?
Yeah, I would absolutely say that we have to start choosing regular folks. I think so many of our other guests here have said that today, that we have to start choosing Nashvillians, the little guy, and not just big corporations. I think over the past couple of years, we've seen, deal after deal made with big companies who are coming to Nashville, and others at the expense of folks who have lived here or just regular families. And so I would say that's a first step. And also for the city to continue choosing to invest in making sure we have the infrastructure to support Nashvillians, to support families, communities of color who have called this city home and are currently being pushed out and can't afford it anymore. So I would say that that's a first step. And I'd also add that it's all of our responsibility to make sure that we influence and shape the vision for the future of Nashville. And so I think it's, we may not like politics, but we have a responsibility to make sure we know what's happening and that we make our voices heard.
Speaking on that responsibility, as someone who lives here to make sure that you know what's happening, Brendan, how are you planning to take part in the fabric of Nashville?
Something I think that is important when you move anywhere, and it's no different here in Nashville, is taking part in celebrations of the city or place's history. Like Broadway is nice and shiny, and that's all great. But, I've spent my downtime, I've been to, museums and things like that, trying to get a sense of what Nashville was like before, the It article, and what it was like before everyone started coming here, and things that matter to people beyond just, look, there's downtown or there's Midtown, things like that, because that's just a very small part of what Nashville is. And there's way more people here, living their lives than, just the attractive things that bring people here in the first place.
Tom, tell us, what are some of the ways that people who are new to town, how can they find and create community for themselves here?
Brendan just said it. I think getting involved in whatever they're here for and about. I think the creative side, this town, it's 13 colleges and universities within the city limits. It's actually a very, I'll say, blue community in terms of its belief system, its education, and where I saw the change happen is COVID. There was no leadership on Lower Broadway anyway, and there was an influx of people really out that are 5 counties around Nashville that came down because you could, be disrespectful and anyway, I don't want to go that way, but for Brendan, I'd say, just what he's doing. I think this town is very easy to get to know your neighbor, but you sometimes have to put the effort.
Judith, tell us, what specific policies or programs would you like to see from the city to make Nashville the It City for everyone?
Yeah, so 2 things I'll bring up is, one, continuing to expand immigration legal services. I work specifically with immigrants, and one of the things that we know is that when people have the ability to adjust their status, whether that's applying for citizenship or a green card, that means they have access to other resources. So that's, driver's license or opportunities for a better paying job. And so, that's a starting point there. And then, I think affordable housing is an issue that impacts everybody, and that we really have to start addressing in a significant way to make sure that folks are not continuing to be pushed out of the city that they call home.
Mm-hmm. Now, Wig, before we leave, let the people know what's in store for them should they come down to see you play and sing at Acme Feed and Seed.
Well, first of all, I would when the people come down to the Acme Feed and Seed to see me, they see a realism, of a singer that does his thing, blues, soul music, jazz, whatever. I think that the people, if they come down there, they enjoy themselves. That's what's important to me.
Mm-hmm. That is Charles Wig Walker. He was joined by Judith Claire-June from Truck. She was also, and musicians, pardon me, Brendan McLenaghan and Mr. Restaurateur, Mr. Tom Morales. I want to thank you all for being with us today. We want to thank everybody who tuned in this hour. Tomorrow, with a litany of bills at the State House targeting trans people, we're inviting some members of the trans community to talk about what life is like for them right now. This is Nashville is a production of WPLN News and Nashville Public Radio. Listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Our producers are Steve Harouche, Rose Gilbert, and Magnolia McKay. Our digital lead is Anna Gallegos-Cannon. Michaela Elias is our technical director. Our executive producer is Andrea Tudhope. The masterminds behind our theme music are Larange and Namir Blade. Special thanks to Mr. Derek Topper. The conversation doesn't end here. Tweet us at This Is Nashville. Find us on Instagram and tell us what you want from our show by filling out our quick survey online. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil Ekalona. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. And be good to each other.